Happy Halloween.
It's spooky month.
I think our listeners should know that Hannah is wearing a sweatshirt that says witchin'.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really amazing. And I think we're going to have to post a
incredible.
picture of it.
Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to take it off until it rots off my body. This is how dedicated I am to my jumper.
So I know it's been a while, but we actually got together and socially distantly carved pumpkins, of which we, of course, filmed. So that's going to go out on our YouTube channel if you guys want to watch that. I think we're posting that on Halloween Day.
Yeah, Halloween Day. So you can see us. It's Hannah's first time, although I don't know. I was a bit
carving a pumpkin.
Yeah, first time carving a pumpkin, and but she was really good at it, which is really annoying.
My only defense in this that you don't believe that I've never carved a pumpkin before is that I have cut open a number of butternut squashes.
Okay,
and I have also eaten a lot of pumpkins, so I'm hoping.
I don't know. You guys decide for yourself. Watch the video. You let us know if you really think Hannah's never carved a pumpkin before. Yeah, so that's coming out Halloween. Just go over to our YouTube channel and you can watch us chat about all sorts of stuff and carve pumpkins. And then you know what? You have to rate whose pumpkin wins. So follow along there.
Yeah, I still have all three of them. We did at my house. I inherited the finished pumpkins. They are pretty much rotten on my balcony. They're looking a little bit sad, but at least we have a fair amount of pictures in their prime. You know, when they're looking great, because they're not looking so great anymore.
We also had some great spooky snacks as well.
Yeah, those snacks were 10 out of 10 if I'm honest.
So yeah, you can head over to there and see one of our snacks too.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Murder Friends, the podcast where three friends from three different countries talk about murder. My name's Alana, and I'm Canadian.
I'm Anna, and I'm American.
My name's Hannah, and I'm British.
So sit back and relax, you're among friends, and let's talk murder. Now, I think this has sort of been our little spooky month tradition, is we get together and we each tell a scary, creepy, unnerving, unsettling, what have you, true crime story. So this year I'm going first. I love, in any sort of school type presentation, I want to go first. I'm too nervous to sit through. I gotta go first. So I'll go first. Now, I actually Googled a bunch of different stories because I wanted, I felt like it should be Canadian, keep it in the family kind of thing, but none of them were really interesting. So I actually found, and I don't know how, I found the story of Mike Mansholt. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of him. It was actually kind of hard to find information about him, but there's this absolutely incredible story on insider.com, which is where I got most of my information. So if you want to read the whole thing, we'll put it on the website, but it's done in a way that's sort of like a narration on the whole story. It's really, really good. So we start off in the summer. Lots of teenagers are going on their first big holiday without their parents. This includes 17-year-old Mike Mansholt from Oldenburg, Germany. There's a lot of German names and places, which I'm very sorry in advance. So as a 17-year-old, he travels to Malta solo for the first time, and he never returns. We start off with the father, and this particular narrative sort of follows the father's quest to figure out what happened to his son, Bernard Mansholt. So he's trying to stay calm, but his son Mike is not home. His seat on the plane was empty. So the father sort of thinks, well, maybe he missed his flight. Maybe he was late. Something sort of normal that happens to a 17-year-old boy who's not really paying attention, all that kind of stuff. However, Mike's cell phone is dead, so there is no way to get in contact with him to see what happened. And the dad just doesn't feel right. Anyone who actually looks through this case, whether it's files from Germany, whether it's files from Malta, you can talk to diplomats and investigators from multiple agencies and countries. All of the stories are different and none of them really make sense, which I think was why I found the story so interesting. So the things we do know, Mike was 17 when he disappeared. He traveled to Malta for his first vacation without his parents. He was very much like an outdoorsy kind of guy, lots of exploring on his own. He had a GoPro, he filmed like cliff diving and that kind of stuff. So he's like an outdoorsy, athletic kind of guy. Bernard, the father, knows everything about the first and last day of his son on the island. So Mike had checked in to Astra, which is a small hotel on the east side of the island. There are cameras that capture him, so we know he was there. We see Mike's sort of in the last potential moments of his life. You can see him walking. He has a blue t-shirt. He has his mobile phone in his hand, and he has a backpack over his shoulder. So he leaves his room, number 105, at 8:40 a.m., and he returns at 9:10 a.m. So he leaves briefly, comes back, he asks for the bill, then he locks his door at 9:55. He then steps out of the lobby and walks down to the harbor. So we believe that the actual official disappearance happens within the next few minutes, but of course we can't see it. We don't have any camera footage. But we do believe that after leaving the hotel, Mark borrows a black, bluish colored mountain bike from the harbor. It's one that has like a particularly light frame, and it's quite suited for the environment where he's biking. He wants to visit the realm of the dead, which is so off-putting, knowing that he disappears. But there's these catacombs with sort of like ancient tombs and stuff, and he sends a message via WhatsApp sort of around this time that he wants to go there. At that moment, we're at 10:11 a.m. on July 18th, 2016, and Mike is online for the last time. So 4 days later, when his plane was supposed to bring him home, his mother and sister expect him in the arrival area in Germany, but the flight is delayed, and then eventually it's canceled. And they can't get a hold of Mike to begin with. So then they think, well, maybe he is stranded somewhere. He had a connecting flight. Like maybe he's stuck somewhere and he doesn't have his phone. Like they can't get in touch with him. The mom is like worried immediately. So she actually reports him as missing to the police in Germany almost immediately. He officially becomes a missing person July 23rd. So this is just days after he's last online. When they're plugging in the details of Mike into the system, he's 5'5", he has red hair, he's muscular. The officer in charge discovers that according to the internal police system, there has already been a search for Mike taking place in Malta for the last 4 days. It says he hadn't been seen on the island since that morning he rented the mountain bike and he never returned. The manager of the hotel also waited 4 days before she notified the police, but nobody had actually got in touch with the family. So at this point, the Federal Criminal Police Office, or the BKA, takes the case. They assign a high priority, that this is an official missing persons case. They check flights. There's no movement under his name. He truly is missing at this point. On July 26th, the police receive an anonymous tip that a body has been found on the island. There's TV cameras already waiting as the father reaches the Dingy Cliffs. Sorry if I didn't say that right. It doesn't feel right, but that's how it's spelled. And this is Malta's highest point at 250 meters. So the father shows up. There's TV crews. There's search dogs. There's an ambulance. There's stretchers. They've secured the area. They're taking pictures. They state that they have recovered a body and it had been lying in the sun for quite a long time. So there's quite a lot of decomposition and stuff. We get a little, in this article that I was talking about, the Insider article, it actually goes into quite a bit of the father actually rushes up and he opens the body bag and he has to see for himself. And of course there is a body in the bag, but they can't identify whether it is his son yet until they do DNA, which of course it does come back as Mike's body. But at this point, when he's sort of rushing the scene and he's looking in the bag, he's told by a doctor at the scene that the back of the dead man is broken twice. A quick death, they added. But at this point, the death is assumed to be unascertained. But he is told that the back has been broken, so it does seem like he fell off the cliff, broke his back, could have died instantly. But of course, I didn't pick this story because of that. We find out that on August 8th, so a couple days later, the father is visiting the morgue when an employee takes him aside and tells him that there are no fractures. Unofficially, she adds. But the father says, I was told his back was broken, like in 2 places, and now you're telling me there's actually no breaks. Like, how do you fall off a cliff and not break anything? So then the father calls the police, especially the police officer in charge. He's confronting her. She's evasive. He's not really getting any answers on what's going on. It kind of seems like nobody really knows what's going on. But as a father, in a foreign country, your son's just died. He's really freaking out. He also wants to know about the son's camera. So like I mentioned before, Mike was really into sports, rock climbing, cliff diving, all that kind of 17-year-old boy, scary kind of stuff. And he had a GoPro Hero 2. And he had the camera with him on this trip, and they can't find it. And it's not in his possessions in the room because the father has already cleared out the boy's room. They had given him only a couple of belongings that was left in room 105. So there was a pair of sunglasses, a camera case, and Mike's shoes. So his shoes were in the hotel, but no GoPro camera. Allegedly, it was found near the cliffs, and Mike could have filmed, his last moments if it was an accident. Maybe he had the camera on. And so the father is really, he really wants to get his hands on the camera. What was on the camera? The police officer in charge states she knows about the GoPro. A camera has already been found. We have Mike's camera, yada, yada, yada. The father finally gets the camera, and the Malta police give him a Canon, a big kind of DSLR camera, which is older than Mike's, and it has a destroyed memory chip, so they can't even look what was on it. Up until this point, his GoPro has never resurfaced, so we will never know what was on it. His backpack was also missing. His Samsung Galaxy phone was missing. His wallet, his credit card, even his straw hat and an extra phone charger is all missing. But I didn't pick this story because his stuff was missing. It gets worse. On August 20th, Mike is given a funeral on his 18th birthday to make it even worse. But the funeral director opens the coffin and realizes that Mike has not been embalmed, which is illegal.
Oh, dear.
You're supposed to do it immediately. Yeah, it is supposed to preserve details. So the undertaker calls the police. The police now take the case, and they notice something else. The body seemed to be too light when it was flown from Malta to Germany. The reason is that most of Mike's internal organs are missing. So we're talking brain, heart, lungs, liver, pancreas, adrenal glands, right kidney, bladder, prostate, stomach, small intestine.
That's the majority of your insides.
That's all of them.
That's 90% of it, right? Just left a kidney in there.
Yeah.
We know that Mike was not an organ donor, so somebody took his organs. The father goes back to the Maltese authorities and is basically saying, please send me the rest of my son's organs, because he assumed that they must have been removed during that first sort of collection of the body in Malta. Based on the father's research, the public prosecutor's office in Germany suspects that Mike might have died through involvement of a third party. The word irregularities is noted in this new report. A second autopsy is ordered in Germany this time. Medical examiners are present to provide legal certainty. The father is told in writing that his son had not been embalmed, and because of that, the reason why a cause of death, they can't determine a cause of death because he has not been embalmed. So we can't get any details from the body at this point. It's too decomposed. They can't. Yeah, it's just awful. The German forensic scientists cannot find anything that a 30-meter fall would have left behind, especially considering the fact that there are no large wounds. It's quite clear that a fall would have been practically impossible, especially since he didn't break a single rib. And because of the advanced decomposition of the remains, a third-party fault cannot be ruled out. But the Maltese stick to their official statement. They say he fell down the cliffs, and it was a tragic accident. So we get that second autopsy in Germany, but they really can't rule out anybody at this point. They can't rule out that he fell, although he had no broken bones. They can't rule out that somebody killed him. It's also possible that Mike crashed and died of his injuries. That's still the Maltese. I always think he thinks of the
Maltese.
Sorry. Because the degree of decay and the missing organs, possible internal causes of death could no longer be detectable. So say he crashed his bike and he hurt himself and he died of heat stroke or dehydration. Like they just can't tell because there's nothing to go off of. Maybe Mike even climbed up the cliffs because he had a light mountain bike. He could have put it over his shoulder. Maybe he fell. But again, why would you climb the rocks? It's hot as hell. It's late July. Why didn't he just ride his bike?
Did they find the bike? Or does it not say?
Yes. Yes. So they do find the bike. It's a little bit damaged, but not too much. It's also higher up on the cliff than he is.
Oh.
So take from that what you will. Also, Mike wasn't wearing any shoes. So
You're not going to climb a cliff with no shoes on, surely.
I mean, he is 17.
Yeah.
You're not going to ride a bike with no shoes. Like, that's not nice. You know, the pedals, like, it's just, why would he have no shoes on? Unless they came off if he fell. Isn't that, like, a thing that happens, like, shoes come off?
Yeah,
you know, when people are, like, hit by cars, like, that happens or something? Maybe that could be along the same lines.
Could be. They, of course, also talk about the possible, like, organ trafficking or at least organ theft. But how would it be possible to remove the organs professionally in the heat? And why would the brain be missing? That's not something that you traffic. Also, not a single large aid organization has ever documented a single case of organ trafficking in Malta. So the father, God bless him, is like trying to piece everything together. We're talking multiple countries and different languages and different agencies and everything. And he thinks, well, who was present during the first autopsy in Malta? He finds that doctor, but can't get him to say anything, basically. Only once does he reply to an email written by the father, and he says, the organs were already missing before the autopsy. They were eaten by rodents, he says. He says he handed the information to the head of the investigation in Malta. But in one statement, the doctor mentions mice. In another, he mentions rats. And Mike's brain, it simply dissolved in the sun.
Is that a thing that happens?
No.
He's saying it is, but nobody else shares that opinion. And the German forensic scientist in charge states that there were no bite marks found on the body. So if it is rodents, there's no trace of them. And if his brain decomposed in the heat, there would be some level of it left behind. But there is nothing. There are no traces. There are no pieces.
But was his head cut open?
Well, it says that, I guess the issue is they cut him open for the autopsy.
Right.
But they don't say at what level he was before that.
Okay.
But there's no traces of his brain or anything. But then maybe somebody took them out and didn't record it properly. Like, there's really no way to tell. And also, it comes back again, a proper embalming of the body would have been required. But because it didn't happen, a cause of death probably will never come about because the evidence is all tainted. Mm-hmm. The authorities were able to clarify that Mike did not die of a projectile. His skull is not broken. He did not suffer any blunt force trauma. So, I mean, who the fuck knows? The hyoid bone as well, I don't know how to say that, but the one when you're strangled that gets impacted, that was missing, so we can't say he was strangled.
Jesus.
The father finally returns to Malta in November of 2017. He's going to do, like, his one last shot. Like, he's going to confront people and just one last time see what happens. The GoPro still hasn't been found. He tries to get in touch with the police officer, the woman who was in charge. She basically says, please leave me alone. To this day, there is no convincing proof that the place where the body was found is also the place of death. At this point, the work on this case, like we said, it involves multiple countries. It was actually reopened because people were talking about it online, and newspapers picked up the story. But after the case was reopened, the Malta judge basically comes to the same conclusion again. Mike fell off a cliff. There's no other explanation. And at this point, the father basically just kind of accepts that. He talks about in the article that he knows that he will probably never know what happened to Mike, and he just kind of has to live with that. Otherwise, it's just going to destroy his whole life, basically. And what's crazy, I mean, on top of all of it, is the German Public Prosecutor's Office originally ruled out the story that he fell from a cliff because he has no bone fractures. Like, how is that possible? But now, at the conclusion of this additional investigation, suddenly they believe, yes, he must have fallen off the cliff. Maybe the trees on the cliff slowed his fall, and the rocky bottom sort of acted like a slide so he didn't break bones. But that's basically how they're leaving it at this point. Nobody knows what happened to Mike's internal organs. Nobody knows how he died, but the official cause is that he fell off this cliff, which I think is absolutely bonkers.
It just seems like the worst handled case ever, and which makes it seem like a massive cover-up of some sort.
Yeah, or maybe the people who found him at the beginning really truly fucked up, and they didn't do things the way they were supposed to, and then, like, ooh, we should probably cover up the fact that we majorly screwed up. But we don't know what happened to his organs. The autopsies were all kind of fucked up. He wasn't embalmed. So the story is so bananas that I felt like it would really suit our Halloween episode. It's also very grim. I probably should have started off with that.
Wait till you get to mine.
No.
Don't worry. Yeah, that's interesting. It's always like when I find those interesting. As infuriating unsolved ones aren't, but stuff like that when it's just like a mystery. Like, I would consider that like a real mystery. Like, we don't even know if it was like a murder, but it's the missing organs is creepy, you know?
Yeah, and the no broken bones.
Yeah, and the brain.
The no broken bone.
Yeah, the brain. Yeah.
The brain. You get the brain involved and you're like, no, thanks.
Too far.
Yeah. So that was good. It was interesting. Not good. It was interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a pretty much a downer. But yeah, that is the story of Mike. We'll post the article on the website. It goes really in depth into like what the father step by step does to try and figure out and piece things together. And unfortunately, he really doesn't get anywhere other than the official line that Mike fell off the cliff and didn't break any bones, but somehow died.
And his brain went missing.
Yeah.
Nice.
Wow.
So for my spooky story, it's not really spooky, but I thought it was very on brand and topical for 2020. I'm going to tell you about the dancing plague of 1518.
Oh.
Have either of you heard about it?
No.
No, okay.
I don't think I've ever heard the word plague and dancing together.
No. Yeah. No.
I'll tell you all about it. So my sources came from Wikipedia, The Guardian and the BBC. And just like Alana, we're keeping it on the continent, so I'm going to take you to Strasbourg, July 1518, which is now in France, but in 1518 it was part of the Holy Roman Empire. A lot of what I'm about to say is pretty like alleged and to be taken with sort of like a big pinch of uncertainty salt, because in 1518 no one really did like daily gratitude journaling or like Facebook lives. They couldn't check the local BBC News. There isn't a huge amount of notes.
Record keeping wasn't great.
Yeah, I just write it down, mate. So in July 1518, there was a lady called Frau Trophea, and she just began dancing in the street. Nothing really to worry about. We've all done it. And there probably wasn't a huge amount to do in 1518, apart from try not to die. Because the late Middle Ages and like the beginning of the Renaissance period were pretty
try to make it
brutal,
past like 35.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. If you can do that, scored.
Oh my
So
God.
people just kind of ignored it until it sort of became clear that she couldn't stop. And then other people started to join in. So
I think I remember this.
Yeah.
Keep going though. Keep going.
So they barely stopped to eat or drink. They carried on with their dancing for days and days, and then they started to collapse through exhaustion. So the authorities decided to intervene, And as it was starting to get like a bit chaotic in the streets, and they thought, if these people need to dance, then why not give them the perfect place to do that? So maybe they'll like dance it out. So they cleared areas, they set up stages, they opened up the guild halls where music was played, they hired drummers and pipers to play music, and this did nothing but encourage other people to join in. Local doctors thought that the cause of the dancing was, in quotes, overheated blood on the brain. But then that's 1,500 doctors for you. They were like, got a headache, ghosts in your blood, take this cocaine. So
I was going to say, are you sure it wasn't cocaine? Like,
we'll just ignore that.
They were really high.
So in the Strasbourg City Archives, there is a poem that basically says they didn't stop dancing until they fell unconscious and some started dying. How many people died? There's huge amounts of speculation about this. Some say it was killing 15 people per day, but there are no real or credible sources attached to this. There is a book called A Time to Dance, A Time to Die, The Extraordinary Story of the Dancing Plague of 1518, which title is far too long, by a man called John Waller. And he basically says in this book that the deaths were only mentioned when the story was retold, so no one like really fucking knows if people actually died. Eventually, authorities were like, fuck this. They decided they didn't have hot blood on the brain, but were rather suffering from some kind of holy wrath. So they banned music and dancing in public. They took those who were dancing to a shrine for St. Vitus. Here, at this shrine, the people who were dancing, their feet were bloodied and horrible, and they put them into red shoes, and then they were walked around this wooden figure of St. Vitus. At this point, most people stopped dancing, and the epidemic had ended about 2 months after it started. It was believed that it's 1518, so, you know, it was believed that St. Vitus was punishing the sinners by making them dance. But was it holy wrath? Was it hot blood? Or was it something else? There had been other instances of dancing outbreaks also along or near the River Rhine, so it wasn't an isolated occasion, but there are three main theories of what could have caused it. The first one is spirit possession.
Nice.
Yeah, but
okay.
Yeah, it sounds
so
bonkers.
1500s of them.
I know. Yeah, exactly. So it sounds really outlandish to us, but people in the early 1500s believed that they could have their souls taken over by a deity or a spirit. There's an anthropologist called Erica Bourguignon who notes that if you are brought up in this, quote, environment of belief, quote, then that kind of almost readies people into entering these mental states that are dissociative in nature and let them disable their normal consciousness. So because they believed it could happen, they didn't like try and fight it. The second is mass psychogenic illness. The year before in Strasbourg, 1517, it was described in the record books as a bad year. So there were harvest failures, wheat prices were going through the roof, social and religious conflicts and tensions, new diseases just popping up. And so people were really, really worried that God was just super pissed at them. So they might have been a little bit more like suggestible than they normally would have been. It's also referred to as like mass hysteria, but no one really calls it that anymore. Basically, if there's a threat, whether it's real or not, it can create these kind of like collective illusions. And the third one is LSD. Well, it's a chemical linked to LSD. Ergotism, or ergot, is a type of mould that grows on damp wheat and rye, which when ingested can cause convulsions and hallucinations. So my money is on LSD for the cause of the dancing plague. But I was thinking, if there was like a dancing epidemic now, I just think about all the white girls in the streets dancing to WAP.
I know.
Just think of all the TikToks.
It's terrifying.
I was going to like ask you I wondered what dancing looked like in the 1500s, because I mean they weren't twerking. So like what was it like?
I would have no idea. I like how the authorities were like, oh, if you want to dance, we'll let you dance. And then they were like, no, this is too chaotic. Take them to a shrine.
They're obviously possessed.
Yeah, you're obviously possessed. But my money's on LSD. But
yeah, I bet something that it was like you're right, a psycho.
Psychogenic
something that they probably took on accident.
Yeah.
That's wild.
It's not really like a spooky story, but I thought it was on brand.
Oh, it is.
And also spirit possessions.
Can you imagine how eerie that would be to like you're going to visit your great aunt and you come into the village and there's all these people thrashing about in the street. No music, because I'm assuming nobody has a boombox out there. They're just sort of moving around. Terrifying.
Yeah, no, like, what did somebody start playing music then? Like, I wonder if they were just all dancing, but like nothing, like to nothing. It was just in their head.
Do you know when you get like really, really drunk and you just like have that like that music in your mind?
Yeah.
And you just, so yeah, that's what I imagine it looking like. But yeah, imagine like not being able to stop, and it's like referenced in like pop culture quite a lot. I think it's in Hocus Pocus.
Oh,
there's a bit in Hocus Pocus, like the film, and then I think it's in other types of like media things where people can't stop singing and dancing until they die.
That's wild.
Yeah, I think this one popped up on Reddit or something, because I do remember reading something about uncontrollable dancing. And it was like the 1500s version of Footloose, except more death.
There's an article on Wikipedia called Dancing Mania, which has got like theories attached to it, which is quite interesting. If you're deep dive.
I think about those. What are those like dance parties where they all wear headphones? And so like
silent discos.
Yeah, that's what I think of. That's what I'm like picturing in my head. Just like you're not hearing any music, but these people are like dancing.
It must have been what it looked like though from the outside. People were just like, yeah,
exactly. Like, 'cause from the outside it looks really strange. All right, so for my spooky story today, I'm going to tell you about a pretty horrific incident. Sorry. So I'm going to tell you about the Valiska Axe Murders. Have you heard of them before?
Possibly.
Possibly, okay.
I think maybe get more in the story.
Okay, yes. Just wondering if that triggered anything in your brain. Like, okay, yeah, I know this one. I got my information from Wikipedia and HuffPost, and also, I don't know if you guys know who Bailey Sarin is. She does the makeup. She does her makeup and tells, on YouTube. And I noticed this story, but I'd already started working on it, and then I found out, because I watch some of her stuff from time to time. She's really good. I love her. And she had actually covered them. So then after I'd sort of finished, I went back and watched that and kind of filled in a few other little items that I kind of missed. Right. The Moore family consists of parents Josiah and Sarah and their 4 children. Herman, age 11, Mary, age 10, Arthur, age 7, and Paul, age 5.
An 11-year-old called Herman.
There was an 11-year. I know.
And Paul's the baby.
Paul's the baby.
Baby Paul.
Baby Paul. Yes. So
I'm gonna call my firstborn Herman.
Can you please do that?
Regardless of gender.
It's not a name that's like used anymore, is it? We should bring Herman back. Let's bring it back, okay? You heard it here first, all right? They were an affluent family, and they were very well liked and active in their community and in their church. By all accounts, by neighbors and by the town, they were just, a nice family. So on June 9th, 1912, Mary is the 10-year-old. She invited Ina and Lena Stillinger, they are ages 8 and 12, to spend the night at the Moore residence. That evening, the girls and the Moore family attended the Presbyterian church, where they participated in the Children's Day program, which Sarah had coordinated, so the mother. After the program ended at 9:30 p.m., the Moores and the Stillinger sisters walked to the Moore's house, arriving sometime between 9:45 and 10 o'clock. All right, let's fast forward to 7 a.m. the next day, June 10th. Mary Peckham, the Moore's neighbor, became concerned after she noticed that the family had not come out to do morning chores. It was really quiet. It was weird because obviously a family of that size, you're going to see some activity and see some noise. Hear some noise. Peckham knocked on the Moore's door, but when no one answered, she tried to open the door and discovered that it was locked. That's like a nosy neighbor. Like if your neighbor's like, I haven't seen you this morning, and then full on tries to go in your house, like, whoa,
yeah,
now.
At 7 a.m. I'm
at 7 a.m.
Fuck off.
Like, calm the fuck down. Maybe I'm having a lion. Yeah, so when no one answered, tried to open the door, discovered it was locked. Peckham let the Moore's chickens out and called Ross Moore Josiah's brother. So, like Peckham, Moore received no response when he knocked on the door and was shouting, nothing. So Ross actually had a key, so he unlocked the front door with his copy. And while Peckham stood on the porch, Ross went into the parlor and opened the guest bedroom door. So it's the first door he came to, where he found Ina and Lena, I can't say the two of them together, Stillinger's bodies on the bed. So those were the 2 girls that were sleeping over. Moore immediately told Peckham to call Henry Horton, who was the local police officer, and he left the house and waited outside. So police get there, and all 8 people that were inside the house that night were discovered in their beds, having been bludgeoned to death by an axe. Really grim. Yes. So the doctors concluded that the murders had taken place between midnight and 5 a.m. So they found 2 spent cigarettes in the attic, and they thought that the killer or killers patiently waited in the attic until maybe the Moore family had gone to sleep. Yeah. The stuff of nightmares.
Ultimate nightmare.
The killer or killers began in the master bedroom. So this is where they pieced together, like, what they think, how it went. The master bedroom where Josiah and Sarah Moore were sleeping. Josiah received more blows from the axe than any other victim, so it suggested that he was probably first. His face had been cut to such an extent that his eyes were missing. Okay. So this was rough. The killer or killers used the blade of the axe on Josiah while using the blunt end of the rest of the victims. They were all the children. The same fate happened to them, same as the parents. After the murder, then returned to the master bedroom to inflict more blows on the elder Moores and knocked over a shoe that had filled with blood before moving downstairs to the guest bedroom, and then they killed the 2 visiting girls. So that's what they think were the events that happened. So the thing is, only Lena showed signs of being awake during the attack. So somehow the killer had slipped in the night and systematically killed the whole family and their guests with the axe swing so violent that he left marks in the ceiling, but yet no one woke up. So there's only one that showed that had defensive wounds, which was one of the girls, the visiting girls, Lena. That's the only one. So I don't even know how Sarah was then killed. Her husband was killed right next to her, and she didn't run away or tried to run away, or what happened. So they couldn't figure out why no one woke up.
Were they drugged or something?
Yeah, is that well? But I'm going to guess 1912. It's going to be hard to test for that in 1912. So these are the weird things that happen as well, like the really weird things. So all the doors and windows were locked. A big slab of bacon was discovered in the downstairs guest bedroom next to the murder weapon and a broken keychain. Slab of bacon. Don't know why. Random. The murderer covered the faces of all the victims with linen. So he went back and covered up all the faces of the victims. Every mirror and exposed window pane were also covered with things from the drawers. So he covered up all the mirrors.
Ugh.
Yeah. So
Creepy.
Then there was a plate of uneaten food and a bowl of bloody water on the table. So no idea. Unfortunately, this is an unsolved case. There were never enough evidence to convict anyone of these crimes, let alone figure out exactly what had happened and how and why. But there were several suspects. Okay, so the first suspect was Frank F. Jones. He was an Iowa state senator and business rival of Josiah's. And he was accused of maybe hiring a contract killer to execute the Moore family. But then a lot of people were like, this isn't really a contract killing type thing to do. It's a bit OTT, isn't it, really? For a hired killer. And then why would you take the whole family? You know what I mean? Henry Lee Moore was another one. No relation to the Moore family at all, just the same last name. He had actually later on ended up bludgeoning his mother and his grandmother with an axe months after these murders. And he was suspected of being sort of a serial killer, thinking that maybe he had actually done a bunch of other axe murders. Then there was the Reverend George Kelly, a traveling minister who actually did confess to the crime in 1917. So Kelly was in Villisca at the time of the killings and even posed as an inspector from Scotland Yard to get a closer glimpse of the murder scene. Although I don't know why Scotland Yard was in Iowa.
Far from home.
But whatever.
On holiday, just in the area.
Yeah, just here, just around. He was also a rumored sexual deviant, which that could be a lot of things in 1912, who struggled with mental health issues his whole life. Soon after signing his confession, though, he recanted. And he was actually tried twice for the killings, but he was cleared of all of them because there was just no evidence that he actually did it. They think perhaps he just had mental health issues, or it could have been a false confession where he could have been pressured into confessing because they found him to be odd, which happened probably a lot more back then than it did. Even nowadays, you still get the false confessions where the police lean on people too much, but who knows? So I guess we will never know what actually happened to that whole family. But this is like pretty gross. You'll hear about this. So someone has bought the Moores home. It's still standing. They bought the home and they turned it into a museum. Yeah, so gross.
Poor taste.
This is the worst thing. You can pay to stay in the house. Yes. They literally raffle off. So the night on the anniversary of the murders, because it's so, like, people want to stay so bad on the anniversary of the murders, the 9th and the 10th of June, that they, like, raffle it off every year. So you, like, have to put your name down and hope that you get to stay there.
Yuck.
It's kind of gross.
I know, how awful
Don't they do
is
that at the Borden house, don't they? Like the Lizzie Borden house. That's like a guest house now, isn't it? You can stay there.
I'm like, guys, this is too far. This is just disgusting.
Like a whole bunch of kids, too.
The kids died. The kids were... 6 kids were killed. 6. Like, why would you...
Want to stay there.
Yeah, and also, I think they're like ghost hunter people-y, like, type thing. You know?
It kind of reminds me, I think it was my story for our Halloween special last year about that farmhouse.
Yeah.
I think that was Germany as well.
Yeah, it was,
where everybody in the house died, but it was like, how could they have been murdered without alerting the other people? Like, that whole idea really freaks me out. And also the same thing with that story about how they think the person was in the ceiling, like the attic, waiting.
I know.
Like, every time I hear creaking, like, in the loft here, I think, okay, my time has come. Like, it's going to happen now.
Yeah. It's like, when I started like researching this one, I was like, oh, this is quite similar to your one. So I wasn't going to do it anymore. But then I got so into it, I was like, oh, I still, like, I'm going to tell it now. But it was very similar to yours. But it's just really, like, bizarre. Very similar. But do you guys ever do this? Okay, not so much. But, like, do you ever, like, creep yourself out? Like, you go downstairs for, like, a glass of water or something, and the house is dark, the window, it's dark outside, and you're just going to go downstairs. And you ever get that, like, where you start thinking, yeah, but what if there's somebody, like, behind me? And you might be home alone, and then you just do that thing where you just, more so when you're young, and then you, like, dart up the stairs and jump into bed because it's going to be fine. Like,
because that's the safe place. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, it's fine. But this is, like, one of those stories that, like, give me that, like, ugh.
I find it, like, quite hard to, like, psych myself out, like, creep myself out. Because my house is, like, creaky and old. So you hear everything. So when you do hear, like, footsteps or things moving around, I just kind of ignore it now. Because I'm thinking, like, I've lived here for a while. If you're going to murder me, you would have done it by now.
Yeah.
That's the way I feel about Glenda.
Yeah. I was just going to bring up the creepy doll.
So, yeah. I thought if she's going to do it, she would have done it by now. She's looking at me like this. So, babe.
Oh, is she looking at you right now? We've just given her ideas.
Yeah, she listens to all of our murdery
podcasting.
Oh, good.
She takes her little notes.
With those tiny hands.
It's the tiny hands. I can't. Well, that's all we have for today. Thanks for listening to our spooky stories. All of our sources and everything is on our website at murderfriends.com. You can email us at murderfriendspod@gmail.com with any suggestions or anything you want to let us know about for True Crime 101s or good weird crime times. Follow us on Twitter at murderfriendspd, Instagram murderfriendspod. And don't forget, check out our YouTube on Saturday, the 31st, on Halloween, and you can see our brand new special video. We haven't had one in a while because we were a man down for like 7 months or 8 months. So we're back, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.